Good morning, everyone. So nice to see all of you today. We're going to wait just 1 or 2 more minutes. There are still lots of folks coming in through the waiting room, but then we'll get started with our panelists from Bombas. Again, you are all muted, as you know. If you need anything, feel free to message me or Keith Howie, and we can attend to that, or you can raise your hand. I see some of you already started putting your name and your SYP provider in the chat. Thank you so much. Good morning, guys. It's so nice to see all of you. For those of you who this is your first Pencil webinar, nice to meet you. If you could please put your name and your SYEP provider in the chat, that will help us to track attendance. All right. Well, it is just a little bit after 11, so we are going to get started. Keith will keep letting folks in through the waiting room, but let's start off by introducing our panelists. First, there's me. I'm Katie King. I think I've met most of you virtually. We are also joined by Rachel Rappaport, Senior Graphic Designer at Bombas, as well as Chloe Thompson, who is Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, and Samantha Wong, Head of Data Analytics. And I am going to turn it over to Melania Morris, who's also with us, who is going to share a little bit about Bombas as a company.
Hey everyone, my name is Melina. I'm on the giving team at Bombas. Bombas is a mission-focused apparel brand with a mission to help those in need. Our founders started the company when they were on Facebook and they saw a quote that said socks are the #1 most requested items at homeless shelters, and they wanted to change that. So what did they do? They took your normal sock and they made it 1,000,000 times better. And we also did research and development on making an equally as special donation sock. For every pair of consumer socks that are sold, a pair of donation socks are donated to the homeless, at risk, and in need all across the country. And in 7 years, we have donated 30 million pairs of socks to 3,500 partners. And we've also expanded into t-shirts and some more things. And that's us.
Thank you so much. So now we know a little bit about Bombas, and all of our speakers are working at Bombas, so we'll be learning more about that company as well as the different departments and roles it takes to make all that work happen. For our students, just before we jump into that, a reminder on your ground rules. As I mentioned earlier, you are muted. We can unmute you if you want, if you need to raise your hand. You can also always put your questions in the chat. We will be watching that and pulling questions out of the chat throughout the panel, so please share your thoughts there. If you're using your video, please remember we can all see you and what's happening behind you. We love to see your faces, but just be aware of that. And lastly, again, raise your hand if you need to speak. If you want someone to chat you something and ask a question, you can raise your hand. All right, and I think we've done this a couple of times, but if you haven't already, in the chat box, please tell us your name and your SYEP provider. And I'm also going to share some icebreaker polls. So these should pop up for everyone. Please let us know how you're feeling today. What you're excited to learn about from our panelists. Are you excited to learn about their background, what they do every day, a little bit more about the company itself? And because Bombas is a socks company, very important questions about your socks of choice. When I was a kid, someone told me that if you wore mismatched socks, it would help you get over a cold. So I still do that every time I get a cold. Somebody else once told me it's good luck. So for my 4 people who are into their mismatched socks, I support your choice. So how are we doing? We have a lot of excited, optimistic people, curious. That's a very good thing to be during a career panel. A lot of people who are interested in background and education, day-to-day, a lot of people who are just excited to learn everything. I bet those are also some of our curious people. And Black Sox are winning by a landslide, which I never would have expected. I would have expected the White Sox to really take it over. And Pattern is making a good showing. I'm excited about that. All right, so one more second to get your sock feelings in. And then we will hop into the panel itself. Oh, no, goodness gracious. Can I ask Rachel to start us off by just telling us a little bit about your day-to-day?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm the senior designer on the team, and our typical day-to-day starts usually off with a morning meeting where we kind of go over any bigger picture projects that are coming up and just if there's any concerns going on with the team. And after my morning meeting, we have a calendar where it lists out all of our deadlines and project due dates. So I usually go through that, figure out what projects to prioritize first. And after that, I start reaching out to other teams like copy teams, the content team for images. And then I start going and building all of my projects out. I usually start opening up Photoshop and creating all the different templates to work off of. And after a project is starting to become complete, I send it out to my manager to get approvals. And if he has any adjustments, I make those and then send out to get delivered. And that's usually my typical day.
Great, thank you. Samantha, can you share a little bit with us about your day-to-day activities?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha. I work in data analytics. So just for context, it's like very numbers driven, helping the company figure out how to make decisions using numbers. So I think my day-to-day is mostly similar to Rachel, where I think in the morning we generally have a team sync to make sure, because we work pretty cross-functionally with every different department, making sure like what are basically prioritizing all the different problems or business problems that we're looking to solve for the coming weeks or months, and then oftentimes that also involves meeting a lot with the different people at the company to make sure that we understand the problem they're trying to solve correctly, and then once we have a conversation and meet with them, then we can figure out and plan and scope what type of analysis we should be doing, and then once we have that ready, then we would essentially, utilize programming languages, which include SQL, R, and Python, which is all statistical, like software languages that the team uses to actually conduct analysis. And then we would then wrap everything up into, some sort of PowerPoint to kind of present our learnings, and hopefully those learnings can help the company drive decisions.
Thank you. And lastly, Chloe, can you share with us a little bit about your role in day-to-day?
Sure. So mine's a little different than everyone else's. I sort of flex and float and basically work on whatever the leadership of the organization thinks is the most important at any given moment. So every day is really different, which I like because I get bored easily. So some days I may spend the whole day interviewing people, and we sometimes call it therapy, like internal therapy, talking to people about basically business problems and where potentially things could get solved. Other days I'm really deeply working on like PowerPoint presentations or Excel, working with Sam's team and other teams. And then other days I spend a lot of time doing research, either online or also talking to people at other companies about how they do things. So I'm sort of a little bit like a mechanic. I try to explain to my parents what I do. It's like I'm kind of a mechanic where if something's broken, I help fix it. Like, we see that our kids' business is declining. Why do we think it's declining, and what could we do? Or also looking for new opportunities. Like we think that we should expand internationally, which countries should we go into and when and in which order and what are we going to need to do that successfully. So really any and everything under the sun, which is what keeps me excited. I can't do the same thing every day.
Thank you. And we're going to stay with you, actually. It sounds like your role is really dynamic. What schooling degrees helped prepare you for your current role?
Sure. So I'm sorry, I'm just pausing notifications. I did my undergrad at Brown, and my major was, I had in political science, but also American studies, which I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was just taking classes that I thought were interesting. And for me, looking back on it, I think being a good writer and learning how to sort of be analytical, not analytical, but synthesize information to come up and tell stories is really the most valuable thing I learned there, as well as with the American studies stuff, just kind of understanding American culture. Like I had to read a 600-page book on the Brooklyn Bridge and why it was built and what impact it had on the city and on working conditions and on labor and sort of just the interconnectedness of things in America. And then I went back and got my MBA 5 years after undergrad, mostly because I kind of wanted to fill out the more analytical math side of things. I was really not the best at math in high school, and I didn't take any math in college because my college let me, everything was optional. And so, that's a regret I have for sure. But I thought, these are tools I need, and I want to have more options. And so I went back and got my MBA, which was very hard, but great. And that both of those really prepared me just to be a problem solver.
Awesome. Rachel, can you share with us a little bit about your sort of educational journey and what prepared you for your career?
Yes, I went to Montclair State University in North Jersey, and I was an art kid, like all through school. Art was just like what I knew and what I excelled at. So I went for a BFA in graphic design. I was always a fine arts kid, so always drawing and painting, and I needed to learn all of the computer stuff for graphic design. That's where I wanted to go, and I really wanted to be able to communicate through my art. And I had a lot of fun at Montclair. They really helped you understand all the programs and understand what you needed to learn to really communicate through your art.
Awesome, thank you. And lastly, Samantha, can you share with us a little bit about your background in education? Samantha's still muted. Can we unmute her?
Okay, great. I had issues unmuting myself, but hi again. I went to Brown University and I studied economics. I'm not really sure how helpful that was, to be quite frank, in terms of like actually pursuing something in data analytics. I do think, I think economics did, because it's a lot of math involved. So naturally, I have like a predilection for numbers. But in terms of like the actual hard skills to really pursue a career in data analytics, it's a lot of learning on the job, learning certain hard skills, learning how to some certain coding languages on the job. And then there's a ton of resources online. I think I definitely try to take advantage of that. But that's a little bit of background of my education.
Thank you. So it sounds like everyone has a couple of different essential skills they need. Rachel, your job is probably very skill specific. Can you share some of the skills and programs that you use most often?
The main programs that we use is out of the Adobe suite. I work in Photoshop every day, and that's probably my main program. After that, it's InDesign for a lot of our packaging stuff, and then Illustrator a little bit here and there for a little more like fun projects if we're making logos or icons to describe what's going on in the stocks. And more recently, if we are doing stuff with motion, we'll hit into After Effects. And some of the other users will use, I'm drawing a blank right now, but it's an interface to help with the website design and like making sure it adjusts for desktop, mobile, iPads. So yeah, a lot of Adobe.
Thank you. And Samantha, can you share a little bit more about how students can explore data analytics and how that works in different organizations? I think every organization has some level of data analytics that they're employing.
Yeah.
Samantha, are you still there? All right, we are gonna give Samantha a minute to manage her tech issues and switch over to Chloe. Can you tell us, there's a lot going on in your job. What do you think is the best part?
For me, kind of the variety is, as I said, I really like that. It's also like I'm a very curious person. I like to understand how things work. I like to ask a lot of questions. I really liked school, judge me if you will. And so there's something about my job, which is like every day I'm learning about how a different part of the business works. So, you know, we were talking this morning about the correlation between how quickly a customer gets their package after they order it, and then how likely they are to be either to be happy with Bombas or to reorder. It was actually some analysis that Samantha's team did. And then taking that and trying to learn about that and how does that look at other companies? What is the broader culture connected to that? You know, like with Amazon now, people are used to getting things in 2 days, and it's sort of I get to learn about all the different things the business is facing and get to figure out how to solve them. I definitely don't always have the answers, but it's constantly learning and constantly working with like tons of different people, and I really like that, and I never get bored.
Awesome, thank you. And Rachel, can you share, have there been struggles in your career path, barriers you've had to overcome, and how have you addressed them?
Some of the biggest struggles with becoming a designer is getting your experience and getting your foot in the door. So you tend to take a lot of freelance jobs. And unfortunately, when it comes to freelance, if I've been at companies where it's not going so great, and one day you have a job when you walk in the morning and you don't. So it's always just learning how to like pick up and go to the next job. And I think also when I finally did get my first like job security, I was full-time hired, I had benefits, healthcare packages, my parents were so proud. It was learning that I wasn't going to be able to grow in this company, and sometimes you just have to like take the leap of faith and start the whole process all over again, going on interviews and just finding a company that's really going to value you for like for your whole skill set, and go where you're really appreciated and just take the risk.
Thank you. And it looks like Samantha's back with us, so let's circle back to her to learn a little bit about how a student can explore more about data analytics and how that works in this industry or in other industries.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry about that. I'm on the road right now, so the connection's a little shaky. But yeah, as I was saying, I would just say like my recommendations is to talk to people. I think there's a lot of resources online in terms of learning different skills, like coding skills like R and Python and SQL. There's a lot of different courses you can take, and I think, you know, reading up on what data analytics means and sort of talking to a lot of people in terms of what that means for different companies, because it's such a nascent industry, I think that's super helpful.
Thank you. And actually, let's stay with you because we have a question in the chat that is for Rachel, but I'd love to have everyone answer it. Is what do you say had the biggest impact on you landing your job, and do you think you were at your dream job?
What is my biggest, sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
What factor do you think had the biggest impact on you finding this job? And do you think it's your dream job?
Yeah, so
Oh, Samantha? All right, we're gonna pitch this to Rachel since it was technically for her, and hopefully be able to circle back to Samantha in a minute.
One thing that I definitely think helped was my portfolio. For Bombas, I had been at a couple places already, so I think it helped that I had been also at e-commerce companies and kind of understood how like the flow of things go, where at e-commerce it can be very fast-paced. And for my dream job, I feel like there was one brand that I always wanted to work for and thought it was my dream job. And I worked there, and it was probably one of the worst places that I've worked at. And getting to come to Bombas and just have people really appreciate what you want to do and ask if there's any other things that you want to do. I get really lucky where a lot of places are strictly digital and just working on the computer. Where here at Bombas, I get to mess with packaging and print, and I got to work on the social team. So I feel like don't get too stuck on what you think your dream job can be, when you land a job that is just great in general and really gives you opportunities to really flourish, that's sometimes your dream job. Sometimes you stumble onto your dream job.
Great, thank you. And Chloe, same question to you. What do you think was the biggest factor in securing this role, and does this feel like your dream job?
Yeah, so I mean, what I do is quite narrow. There aren't that many people that do it. So getting this job was sort of predicated on the fact I did this job other places. I did this for Urban Outfitters and for Cole Haan. And I think getting those jobs had to do with the combination of having an MBA, but also having worked in fashion and retail before that. A lot of MBA types are less interested in sort of the product itself and the consumer and the softer skills. So in that sense, the fact I didn't take any math undergrad and focused more on the soft stuff, it kind of was a combination. And yeah, I think this is definitely a dream job. I kind of had people throughout my career, because strategy is so narrow and there aren't that many roles for it. I've had mentors tell me, you know, you need to move what they call into the business and own a department and own revenue. And I tried that for about a year before I came to Bombas. And for me, the biggest realization was, you know, strategy is what I love and what I'm good at. Why am I trying to do something else? Even if there are risks, you know, there are risks associated with everything. And I also would say 100% with what Rachel said. You know, I have gone from more true fashion to more retail and startups, and I've interviewed at Vogue and Chanel and all these places, and oftentimes the cooler a brand is, the more terrible the working experience is, and also the more people feel they have an excuse to treat you badly because you should just feel lucky to be there. And I think, you know, I'm a deal older than the rest of the panelists, but I was sort of taught, no matter what job you have, you should just feel lucky to be there, and you should never say anything about it or you know, just feel lucky. And I think especially as over the last 6 months in particular, as the way companies treat people have been coming to light more and more, I think finding a place that treats you like a human being and cares about people is really important. And you would be surprised at how many places really don't value that. So I think, as Rachel said, it's less about, is this the brand, I mean, particularly in consumer stuff, is this the brand that I think most resonates with me and who I am as a person? And instead, like, do I feel that this is a place that wants me to succeed, and is the person who I'm working for directly, who they say statistically has far and away the most impact on your happiness, is that person like on my team and somebody I admire and look up to?
Thank you so much for that. And Samantha, are you back with us? Can we give this one more shot?
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to turn my video off if you don't mind, just to make my internet connection will be a little stronger.
Great.
Yeah, so to continue on my, basically, you know, again, I think it's, I think the second part was this my dream job? I think it's really echoing what Rachel and Chloe said. I don't know. I'm not sure. I have a dream job in mind, but I definitely think that, you know, Bombas as a brand is truly caring, very, you know, people centric, very employee first, very mission driven. And I think that's a brand that I would love to be working for. So I'm definitely very happy where I am, and I'm doing something that I, you know, really enjoy, which is data analytics. I'm a numbers nerd, so naturally I think, you know, I'm all in all really enjoying my gig. Just not sure this is, you know, my dream job. But yeah, that would be my response.
Awesome, thank you. And Rachel, can you share a little bit? Chloe spoke about feeling valued and feeling appreciated in the workplace. Can you share a time when perhaps you felt undervalued or you wanted more responsibility and your supervisors didn't see that you were ready for that? How did you approach that? How did you ask for more responsibility?
I think that was a little similar to what I was saying about like the biggest struggle is I was finally at a company that I was settled, I was full-time, and I had been there for about 2 years now. And I am a little more reserved and a little more quiet. And I finally like gave myself a pep talk and decided to like ask for a promotion and see, like trying to get the ball rolling on something. And it just fell through. I could tell that there was no more growth in the company for me. So I started back on my portfolio during lunch breaks, redid my resume, and then just started the process again of just sending things out and thinking, even just going on interviews to just get experience with interviewing again and building up my confidence again. So a lot of the time it's just putting yourself out there and taking the leap of faith.
Awesome, thank you. And Samantha, to go back to you, can you share some strategies that you think are helpful in helping women promote themselves and receive sort of the attention and the prominence within their organizations that they may have been overlooked for?
Yeah, for sure. You know, honestly, I think I would love the opinions of the rest of the panelists here as well. Because, you know, obviously the different people have different tactics and different recommendations. But for me specifically, I think, you know, just not being afraid to speak up. I think sometimes, there's might be even like research or like study done that like women in general don't ask for, are afraid to ask for more comparative to men in the workplace. And I think just being not scared to ask for things around salary and being kind of like strong about your negotiation is pretty key. And then the other thing is like, you know, again, there's definitely other women in the workplace, and there's a lot of different networking opportunities where you can connect with other women in your industry or even outside the industry, just in business or in corporate, and kind of get their perspective on like what is the best approach to ask for more, or what is the best approach to, you know, land the next dream job or next dream role that you have. But that's sort of what would be, you know, my recommendation, sort of how I did it as well.
Rachel, Chloe, anything to add to that in terms of how women can promote themselves to receive more prominent roles in their organizations?
I can add, I agree with Sam. I think it's slightly different for your very first job out of college, but besides your very first job out of college, every single time you get a job offer, ask for more money. They are expecting it. Sometimes they'll say no. I've been told no, but always ask for more. And do the research online about, you can Google like ways to do it or ways to ask, but I didn't know that, and I never once asked for more money ever until I went to business school. And then I got to business school where I was surrounded by a bunch of men and was taught, you know, the way I was taught going into work again was like, be thankful to be there, put your head down and do the work. I feel really lucky to have had the experience at business school where I was around people who really pushed me to say, actually, that's not enough. You need to ask for more money, you need to ask for more opportunities, you need to raise your hand. And it can be really scary. I still get nervous every time I do it. But every single time you get a new job and they tell you what the salary is, after you have the offer, ask for more money. And usually they'll meet you somewhere in the middle. On the hiring side, having been hiring people for the last 10 years, you always, when you give someone an offer, you always expect that they're going to ask for more, so you have a range built in. And the only other thing I'd say is the other thing that's shown a lot in data is like in job descriptions, it'll say 2 to 3 years experience required, and women will see that and will follow that to the letter and say, okay, well, I only have a year and 8 months of experience, so because I don't have 2 years, I'm not going to apply. Men will just apply anyway, and sometimes we'll get the job. If you think something is a good fit, even if you don't meet the exact requirements, don't shy away from pushing for it. But yeah, I think raise your hand and ask for more. And there's also a ton of literature out there. Harvard Business Review is a really, if you want to read, or they have a good podcast called Women at Work. And, you know, luckily there's a lot of resources out there, but it's a fight, and it's a lot of the time it goes against what culturally traditional heteronormative gender stereotypes have taught us is like what means being like a good woman or a good girl, and being able to have the courage to put that is tough, but try to do it if you can.
Thank you. And just two important things before I ask Rachel to also respond. As Chloe said, wait until you have that job offer. Don't ask for more money in the interview. So definitely wait until they have made that offer to you, and then have it be part of the conversation. And lastly, not only women are paid less for their work. People of color, minorities are all paid less for their work. So there are resources on LinkedIn. There is a resource called Glassdoor that provides information by company for positions. So when you're applying, before you go into that negotiation, do a little bit of research. It is important to not only know your worth, but then advocate for it. So thank you for raising both those issues, Chloe. Yes.
I have one more thing, which is just, there is now a law in New York State, if you are applying for jobs in New York State, that forbids employers for asking you for your last salary. The reason for that is because of these systemic underpayment of women and other minorities, that if you wouldn't know that you were if you were underpaid at your last job and you tell them what that salary is, you continue to get underpaid throughout your career. So know also that that's a right you have to not disclose how much money you've made before, and always, if you can, let them start with the number and say, well, how much is budgeted for this role? Because sometimes it may be a lot more than you thought. And find someone in your life that you can have these conversations with, or certainly, I can give my information, but you'll have to do it again and again, and it never gets easier.
Thank you. And Rachel, do you have an addition to the conversation?
I think I would pretty much piggyback off of everything that Chloe said. I feel like just really doing your research, that was definitely something that they didn't really talk about in school, is how to ask, how to negotiate. And I feel like I came from a lower income family, so my first offer sounded super great and super amazing, and I was quick to jump at it. And then when I left and I spoke to other graphic designers and heard how much more they were making, it was almost like a shock, like, well, why didn't they just offer me that? And it never gets easier, but you do have to really fight for what you want, because you're worth it.
Thank you. And I think asking for more money and advocating for yourself is definitely one way to take a risk at work. But I'd love to hear from each of our panelists what the biggest risk you ever took in your career was. And Samantha, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I think, and when I first left college, I joined a bigger company. It's like a more corporate company doing consulting, which is a little bit different. And then I think through that job, I learned that I am a little bit more quantitative heavy, and I sort of liked my numbers more and liked doing really deep analyses. And at that point, I actually didn't have all the skills I needed to really pursue a career in data analytics. So I think that was a risk I was willing to take, to really figure out what are some ways that I can garner the skills that I need to jump into this industry. And then it was just, finding the right company who's willing to take a risk on me as well, which is, someone who's super curious about learning more about data analytics, but doesn't have every single skill under her belt yet. So I would say, that was a good risk, and also just a lot of hard work that kind of went into talking to a lot of people, applying to a lot of jobs. After work, I would learn all the different coding languages or skill set that I sort of need to fill that gap in order to pursue my career in data analytics.
Thank you. And Rachel, we'll throw it back to you. What do you feel like was your biggest risk?
My biggest risk was probably deciding to leave my first full-time job. It was my first time being super comfortable. I loved everyone I worked with, but I could tell that I was undervalued there. And I was leaving a good brand and going for a stock company that I hadn't heard of, and it was super risky to me. And I've had bad experiences with job security, so it was super nerve-wracking, and I wasn't sure what to tell my parents. I was going to lose my health benefits at first, but it ended up being worth it in the end.
Thank you. And Chloe, for you, what was your biggest risk?
There's been so many. I feel like everything is a risk because you never know what's going to happen. I think leaving jobs is really hard, and I've left a lot of jobs. I've had a lot of jobs. And, but for me, I think that not necessarily on purpose, but a theme is sort of, I did take 2 different jobs at 2 different points in my career that were not in New York. And I grew up in DC, but I've been in New York pretty much the whole time since then. And I knew I wanted to be here, but I got a job in Baltimore that I did for a year. And then I worked in Pennsylvania and Philly for 2 years working for Urban Outfitters. And I had to wake up every morning, Monday morning at 5 and drive to Philly and stay down there and come back. And I came back every Thursday night, and it was, everybody in my life was like, why would you ever do that? That is really hard for your lifestyle, all these things for your relationship. And but I knew that the job was going to open doors for me that I didn't find anything in New York that was the same. And so I think even if people in your life say, you know, that doesn't make sense or don't do that, if you feel like something is an opportunity you maybe couldn't get elsewhere, do it. And also, like, if you're willing to move to Baltimore or move to Philly for a year or 2, you might see, you get a sense of the way things are done other places, and also like you get an opportunity that maybe some other people are too short-sighted to consider. So yeah, you can get through anything for a year or 2. And it wasn't Baltimore, it was Linthicum, Maryland, which is right next to where the airport is, an office park where it was, you know, not a great cultural fit, but that was probably the year of my career I learned the most from a functional perspective, and all the time.
Thank you. And I am actually going to piggyback off of that question with a follow-up, which is for all of our panelists. When you had to take that big risk, when you had to make that big decision, what factors did you think about? How did you do that? Who did you talk to? What played into that decision-making process for you? And Rachel, we'll start with you.
I didn't talk to anyone at first because I was scared that it was going to be too big of a risk. But then a lot of my coworkers, it was just us like at lunch complaining about things. And one girl started to leave, another started to leave. So we all just kind of like talked about it. And you really just have to sit there and weigh out your options and what seems like the better choice. I don't think I even told my parents till I finally got the new job. So it's really just, sometimes for me, like I just had to make it on my own and really like sit with it myself to make sure I was doing the best move for me.
Thank you. Samantha, how about you? What is your decision-making process when it's time to make the moves?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, I was able to connect with a lot of people who used to work in my old job and then left. So I got a lot of their recommendation and suggestions talked about with them. And then I was also sort of that one annoying person who sent like so many LinkedIn messages to people in the industry, hoping that something will stick. And, you know, I think you'll be surprised. I think sometimes people are a lot nicer and more receptive in talking to you than you think. So through that, I was able to get connected with a lot of people in the data analytics industry who were just willing to chat about what's it like to work there, what's the day in the life of a person working in data analytics. So through talking with them, that really helped inform my research and my knowledge of whether or not this is a good fit, and I sort of want to make this career switch. But I think those are, the main thing that I would leverage to make my decision.
Thank you. We've definitely had panelists throughout the summer who've shared that they've used LinkedIn to find other people in their industries or at those companies to sort of talk things through with before they make their moves. Chloe, how about you?
I think all the same things, but I guess my only place I would differ is I feel like with really hard decisions for me, advice I was given once is like, for the hardest decisions in your life, most of the time you know exactly what you want to do. You're not ready to admit it to yourself. And I've found that to be pretty much true. I know what I want to do, but either similar to Rachel, it's like, I'm embarrassed to say that I don't want to do the thing that everyone thinks I should want to do, or to work for, I remember at one point my parents were like, oh, so you're selling shoes now? I was like, well, no, I'm not actually selling the shoes, but also if I were, who cares? And, sometimes the talking to people is helpful, but it also is just a way for you to work through your own feelings about it. But like, usually if you're really unhappy with what you're doing, you usually know if it's right. I think it takes some time to come to peace with it and to stop listening to everyone else. Like, talk to people, but then listen to your heart. And I think the most important thing to remember is that nothing is forever. Like, no job, nobody that I know in my generation has been at the same job since they graduated from college. I can't think of even one person. I have one friend maybe who was somewhere for 10 years. So the first job you have out of college does not define the rest of your career. The first job you have out of grad school does not define the rest of your career. Nothing does, and it's never too late to start over. When I left grad school, I said, I don't want to work in fashion anymore, and I went to work in financial services for 3 years. And then I was like, I don't like this, and I went back to retail, which wasn't easy, but it's never too late to start over. And I know how it feels at the phase of life that you're at. It's one, you feel like the choices you make now are going to define the rest of your life. And I believe generally that they won't. And life isn't a straight line. You're going to have ups and downs, and just learning to be resilient with all of that.
Thank you. And that's actually a great segue for one of the questions from one of our students, Senate, who asks, what is the support system at Bombas like for newer or more junior employees in terms of mentorship and career growth, thinking about not being somewhere forever and having ups and downs? Does anyone want to take that? Rachel, I saw you get a big smile on your face.
I think Bombas is really great when it comes to new employees. We started a system where it's called Bee Buddies, and an older employee will get a newer employee for their first 90 days, and you get to do different things. They're usually not on the same team, so it's a good way to intercross with different teams and really get shown the ropes. I think what's also really great is a lot of the executives hold office hours, and it's super open. You can jump in anytime, and people like Chloe and our chief of staff are very nice and very welcoming, and it doesn't feel like you're walking into this big scary one-on-one. They're just very open to share all of their information with you for any questions that you have, whether it's career, whether it's life choices, absolutely anything. So I'm super appreciative that Bombas offers that for us.
Thank you. And one of the things that I think we've heard from all of you is that you all do really different things and you've had really different career trajectories. Do you work together? Do you guys ever interact in your daily work lives, and how do you do so?
I work with Sam's team more. Rachel and I don't work directly together, but work on some of the packaging is something she works on, and then I'm looking at packaging from a process perspective across the company. But I wouldn't say that any of us work together regularly on a weekly basis, but the inputs that everyone creates we all come across each other's inputs and outputs, if that makes any sense.
I think so. I think it's important to think about the way these very different roles do actually impact and intersect one another. So thank you for that. So for each of you, question, what would you recommend to our students who are interested in building their resume and strengthening their skill set over the summer, where maybe there aren't the same opportunities as in the past? And Samantha, we'll start with you. Oh, did we lose Samantha? I think we lost Samantha. Rachel, do you have recommendations for students who are looking to build skill sets over the summer?
I think with design, it's kind of a little easier to resource things. Like I still use YouTube if I'm looking for specific technique. Sorry.
I mean,
Samantha's coming in and out.
Oh, Samantha's coming in and out. All right, Rachel, let's have you finish your response.
So yeah, I think resources like YouTube, a lot of the programs do have a free trial if they want to try and download the trial for a little bit and just practice with that. And also sometimes you can just Google things, and I've gotten Instagram ads to teach me how to illustrate women's clothing and make new designs. So I feel like there's a lot of open opportunities that you can just Google and look up.
Chloe, any recommendations?
I mean, I think depending on what the industry is that you're interested in, reading I read the news every day, like industry publications. So there's like Women's Wear Daily and other newsletters. I also like have a Twitter feed. On my Twitter feed are a bunch of like retail experts and business types, and I follow them, and so I kind of know what's happening with other companies. I also think just like particularly with retail, there's so much you can learn by shopping and not buying, but like just going through the experience of, you know, what I used to do, again, this was like 2004 when I graduated college, is every Saturday I would like walk a different neighborhood and go into the stores and like see what brands they were carrying, see how things were merchandised, touch clothes. So like I felt, you know, I was working in apparel then, and so I wanted to know, okay, what are the stores that maybe we would want to sell in? And what are the brands that if they come up in a meeting, I know what they are? You couldn't really do that at home before. And so I think like browsing around and seeing how different companies do things, subscribing to their emails, subscribing to free newsletters. And then, yeah, with the Googling stuff, like there are sometimes formulas, like I have an MBA and I sometimes still Google formulas just to make sure I have them right before I do them. So, you know, thank God for that.
Thank you. And students, if you have any final questions, we have about 10 minutes left, so feel free to put those in the chat so that we can circle back to them. Oh, I think I just saw one pop up. From Selena, what is your advice for high school students who are unsure about what they're interested in? What would be your advice to them? What should they be doing?
I mean, if you ask me, I'd say don't worry about doing anything. Like worry about protecting your mental health and being around people you love and just finding things that make you happy. Because when this is over, you're going to want to have the energy and excitement to dig back into, you know, something that has a more direct purpose. But, you know, you're never going to regret reading too much. You're never going to regret writing too much, or writing a journal or a diary or something to practice putting words on a page. So those are always things that help. But I think the job I had the summer after high school is I worked as a receptionist in a hair salon, and I learned almost nothing except for, you know, how to stand on my feet all day, which I hadn't done before. But not everything needs to be, you know, a resume bullet. And it's also important to like re-enter the in-person world feeling like good about yourself and your life, and it's not going to matter as much as you think.
Awesome. And a question from Anaf is, what do you feel are the pros and cons of your role? And I'll let Rachel start off on this one.
The pros is almost anything with the Bombas logo that's put out into the world, it comes from our team. So my mom gets to brag a lot when she gets a package in the mail, and she can be like, my daughter made this, which is really awesome to hear that she gets so excited. Some of the cons is probably also that everything that has the logo comes through our team, so it can get pretty busy. But I like having sometimes I like the chaos because you get to like clean it up and let it go. But everything kind of has its pros and cons when it comes to design.
Samantha, are you with us? I know you're here, but I'm not seeing your microphone.
Yep, I'm here.
Great. Let's throw this question to you then.
So pros and cons, I mean, generally I really like my job. I think I'm doing, again, like I'm a huge data nerd and I'm a huge numbers nerd, so I'm doing what I like. So that's definitely a pro. I definitely love working at a place like Bombas. I think I have, a really great boss who actually gives me a lot of autonomy and independence to sort of run, the data analytics team and sort of run with like what I think that data analytics strategy should be or vision should be at the company. So those are all great things. In terms of cons, I mean, right, I think Bombas is definitely not a big corporation. So if, you're looking for something a little bit more stable, at the end of the day, Bombas is still a startup and there's a lot of growing pains that we're still trying to figure out as a company. I wouldn't say those are like very negative cons per se, but I think it's definitely some challenges that we would want to kind of grow past as a company. So those are some, things to take into consideration when you're sort of thinking about, do you want to work for a larger company, a smaller company? Because there's, to Rachel's point, there's pros and cons to everything.
Thank you. And I'm actually going to throw you a second question now. From Eric Lee, what were some of the roadblocks in your career path and how did you bounce back?
Yeah, so I think I kind of spoke to it a little bit before. I really wanted to enter the data analytics industry, which is, again, fairly nascent and also something I wasn't like fully equipped to enter. So that's definitely a roadblock. I had to really work at one, like talking to people, doing my research and what the industry looks like, and then also like learning the right skills in order to land a job in the industry that I want to. In terms of like how I bounced back or how did I overcome it, again, it was just like it was definitely quite defeating, I think, in the very beginning when I was, getting a lot of rejections in terms of jobs because, again, like I wasn't already in the data analytics industry. How do I get my foot in the door? So it was just, being able to face all those rejections, again, just like really using LinkedIn, using my network, working hard at just simultaneously also getting the right skills and learning the right things through taking classes online. There's a lot of free classes online on data analytics and to supplement my resume, supplement my skill set. So those are some of the things that I did in order to, again, like get my foot in the door and kind of overcome that roadblock.
Thank you. And Chloe, we have a question from Senate. What was it like when you started over switching between retail and finance and then back to retail? Was it easier than it sounds? Who helped you? What helped during those times of transition?
I think switch to financial services was harder. Switching back once I did it was super easy because I was excited, I was engaged, it's what I wanted to be doing and it's what felt more natural to me. So I wasn't frustrated by challenges, like the challenges were exciting. What was hard was getting the job, especially getting a job. It's very hard to get a job when you've never done that thing before. And the first job out of college, nobody really knows how to do anything. Rachel might be an exception in that she was trained in a very specific functional skill set, but I think I didn't really know much about anything except for like nothing. And so finding a company that says, we know that you know nothing but we see potential and we want to help you. And then later it's figuring out how to tell your story so that it makes sense. And for me, I was able to say, okay, well, I work for American Express and credit cards are a physical product that people use at the point where they're buying something and it's directly connected to retail and it's sort of a BS story, but figuring out how to create a narrative so that it makes sense, even if it doesn't make sense at the time when it does, but also just being patient. Like it probably took me a year to get back into retail, and in my career, I've probably, got interviewed for and gotten far along in at least 50 jobs that I have then been rejected for. Like, I have been rejected from more jobs than you could ever imagine. And part of that is just applying and if you do switch careers, but I've gotten to the point where I've gone to dinner with 6 people and then they've said, actually, no, we don't want you. And that being able to make yourself vulnerable enough to be like, that's normal, and also knowing that that happens to other people, it's just kind of part of the game. But it's really, you know, both of my parents had been in the same job my entire lifetime when I entered the workforce. So the idea of all of that felt really unfamiliar. So know that that's also normal too. And sometimes you'll have to apply to literally 100 jobs before you get what you want. And then it only takes one. You don't need to get 50 jobs. You just need one that sees the potential.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's something we forget to share with students is people get rejected from jobs all the time. I've gotten rejected from jobs and I've been in the same spot where you know you're one of like the last 2 or 3, but there can only be one, and that's okay. So we just have about 5 minutes left. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Final question for each of you. 2 pieces of advice you would give to your younger self, and one of them is a skill you would recommend that they learn, and the other is just generally what would you want to tell them? Samantha, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I mean, advice to my younger self, I mean, I'm not sure if it's exactly like career oriented, but I would just say like just have some fun, take things less seriously. Where I think everyone here is like in high school. In high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think it's great that you guys are already like sitting on these panels and kind of learning more about different industries, which is something I've actually never done as a high school student. I was just kind of lost. But I think, you know, just kind of figure out what you're interested in. I don't even think it necessarily has to be about like optimizing your resume all the time and optimizing for your job and kind of like hitting all these like ambitious goals. I think it's just like enjoying the journey and kind of figure out what you're passionate about. And I think, you know, once you kind of pour your efforts into what you're passionate about, it definitely shines through, whether it is, you know, from schools or employers. I think you just being passionate and being able to speak to something that's really like that you're actually really interested in and kind of working hard towards it really shows. So I think that's sort of like what I would tell my younger self, and I guess advice. And I don't remember the second portion of the question.
What is one skill you would tell your younger self to work on?
That's a good question. I think one thing I would like to do a little bit more of was like computer science. It was not, because when I was growing up, it was not as big of a thing, like learning how to code. Like I think nowadays, like coding and like computer science is a lot more readily available in like even like, you know, for younger students, which is not available to me when I was growing up. I think that would have been super cool if I was able to actually learn some like programming languages and learn how to build something. That's something I would have wanted to take up on.
Thank you. Rachel, how about you?
One skill set that I would definitely tell my younger self is just to have a little more confidence and not be so afraid of either public speaking or to speak up, and to be confident in the work that I'm doing, because it is good work. And another thing I would tell my younger self is do your research before. Make sure you're asking for enough money. Make sure you know what you're going into. Sometimes your parents don't always know best, so really do your research in the field. And it's, again, at the end of the day, it's just you. It's your life. Like, you have to make sure you're doing what's right for you.
Thank you. And Chloe, do you want to close us out?
Sure. I mean, I think the two pieces of advice I'd give my younger self is, one, kind of like be open-minded. When I graduated from college and, again, was not a math person, I probably didn't even know what business school was or that it existed. And I wouldn't have believed that this would be what I was doing now. So kind of keep an open mind and don't be so rigid, don't be too rigid around like what your expectations are for your life, because there's so many different ways to live a great life. And I guess the second would also be similar to Sam, like not to take myself so seriously. I was raised in like a very high pressure environment where like failure was frowned upon, and it was like an A- was a terrible thing. And one of the things I always tell panels like this of younger people when I speak is like, I was fired once. I was on 2 different teams where the entire team was eliminated. I was moved into a different department in the company, but like, it's not a question of if these things are going to happen. Like, they will happen. Companies you work for will go under. Some of the companies I work for don't even exist anymore. So rather than holding yourself to a standard that's impossible to meet, like expecting that you're going to, even if stuff has been good so far, like there's going to be hard times, and not to blame yourself too much, and to instead think about like, how is this going to make me a better friend, a better parent, a better sister, a better whatever, because now, I have more perspective. But
thank you. I think those are actually really important words to sort of end on, especially at this time that is difficult for everyone, is be your best. Bad things are going to happen, and it's what you do with them. It's what you learn. It's how you support others. It's how you show up. So thank you to Chloe and Rachel and Sam for showing up and being with us this morning. Thank you to my students for showing up and being with us. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning at 11 again. There's another panel. But thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
thanks everyone. It was great to see you.
Bye, guys. Bye, students. Thank you for being with us. Bye, guys. See ya. Bye, kiddos. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for being here. Hi.
You got everything you need?
Okay.